Hi, you're watching DNA Today, a multi-award winning genetics podcast where we explore everything to do with genetics, from CRISPR to rare diseases to new research. We have won the Science and Medicine Podcast Award for many years now. We have hundreds of episodes, and we really hope you enjoy these conversations where we dive into so many genetic concepts. I'm Kira Dineen, a certified genetic counselor, and your host. To celebrate World Down Syndrome Day, which is today, I am joined by Carissa Carroll, founder of Jack's Basket, which is a nonprofit dedicated to ensuring that every baby with Down syndrome is welcomed into the world with joy and support. So we're going to hear about Carissa's story and how it led to all of this fierce advocacy, starting Jack's Basket and even beyond that. She's going to share her experience of how medical professionals can deliver a diagnosis without being biased, and also advice for parents of kids with Down syndrome. So Carissa, happy Down Syndrome Day.
Hey, thank you. What a great day to have this conversation and just share about how our lives are better because of people with Down syndrome.
Yeah, definitely. And I figure I would start with where your journey started. You have this beautiful piece of writing on your website, jacksbasket.org, which we'll link to that specific page in the show notes at dnatoday.com. And it captures the first moment that Down syndrome was brought up about your son, Jack. Can you take us back to his actual birthday and how the healthcare provider broached this subject? Because as listeners will know, and that you know, I'm a prenatal genetic counselor. So I think it's so helpful for other medical providers listening to hear patients' stories and understand how we as a healthcare community can do better. So what was that first experience like? Because you had already given birth to Jack, and then it was brought up.
Yes. So, kind of give some context to how that news was delivered. I actually had to do an emergency C-section when we delivered Jack and or had Jack. My husband and I had a 2-year-old at the time, so we knew the second time around welcoming a new life. But Jack's heart rate had dropped dramatically, and I had to be put under. And my husband wasn't able to be in the room when they delivered him. So that just gives you a glimpse of what ended up happening shortly after is a nurse and a nurse practitioner had brought our baby into the room where Chris was waiting. And the first word she said was, "Are you aware of trisomy 21?" as she handed over our baby to him. And he recalls he must have looked confused because she said, "Well, Down syndrome." She listed off all the characteristics that our new baby was showing and said, "Well, just enjoy your baby." And she left the room. And my husband kind of recalls, not up until that point in his life, he didn't have much experience knowing someone with Down syndrome. He's a very intelligent man. That trisomy 21 isn't language we use every day. So he actually questioned, like, would he live? What would this mean? What does this mean? A variety of health conditions. Really felt alone, and kind of recalled that about 45 minutes later, I was brought back to where he was waiting in that original delivery room. And I was kind of just grieving how the delivery went, not being awake. Certainly not prepared for him to bring over our new baby and say, "Well, this is our baby, and they think he has Down syndrome." And I can recall just a lot of fear, shock, confusion, a lot of those natural emotions when you get, surprising, unexpected news. And a lot of, thoughts of just how would this change us? And so, reflecting back, we weren't together when we received this life-changing news. It was kind of assumptive in saying, "Are you aware of trisomy 21?" That was in 2013. So March 2013 is when Jack was born. And so that's how our diagnosis story starts. There's a significant moment that I always love to share, is that Diane was a nurse, and she came in shortly after she knew that, Jack was diagnosed at birth with Down syndrome. And she said, she came in and she looked at him in that little bassinet and she said, "Look at your precious baby."
Oh,
And when I feared that the world wouldn't accept my son because he's different, he's now has special needs. Like, a lot of people, don't know somebody with Down syndrome. Like, this complete stranger came in and looked at our baby and saw him for a baby, not a diagnosis. And that really was an impactful moment shortly after we received Jack's diagnosis.
So she really turned it around in terms of that initial experience of getting that news that you weren't with. It sounds like Chris is your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that you two weren't together. There's just so much that I think we can learn from this to be like, here's aspects of what to avoid. And then, looking at that nurse, like she probably saw what was happening and was like, I want to come in and kind of give a different perspective in terms of revealing that information. It also is surprising because that's not information that you need to know right away. It's not like baby has something where we need to rush them to a surgery immediately. Then you probably do have to let the parents know this is what's happening.
Yeah.
But that's a conversation that can happen a little later. Nothing's going to change immediately.
Right. And Jack wasn't showing any health concerns at the time. And I can't tell you that Chris would have self-diagnosed Jack. So in a sense, as he's wrapped up just like a newborn, first and foremost, I wish we would have been together. And that is a part of the best practice of when you're delivering unexpected news. What was the rush in why he needed to get that news while he was waiting alone? And also, a big part of it is we just gave birth to our son. We would have loved to have heard congratulations
Right.
on
Why are
your
we
baby.
starting with, what was the phrase? Have you heard of or do you know of Trisomy 21? Also, why are we going with Trisomy 21?
Mhm.
Unless you're like, oh, this is someone that works in healthcare. You also wouldn't say, have you heard of? But the general population does not know of this condition as trisomy
Yeah, right.
21.
It's
It's
the
Down
medical term
syndrome.
for it, but certainly, yeah. So reflecting back on it, just would have loved to have had a moment to, welcome our baby and to be together. And then, and that's ultimately kind of fueled a lot of what we're doing today in the moment that, Jack deserved to be celebrated. Yes, he surprised us with this diagnosis. Whenever you receive this news, prenatally or at birth, it is surprising. It is unexpected oftentimes. And so just kind of reflecting that because of that experience with Jack, that we felt that it was important that things needed to change.
Yeah, so this really prompted you that when Jack turned a year old is when you gave the first basket. So take us a little bit before his first birthday of you have this diagnosis. I'm sure, like many parents, you start Googling information to learn more about Down syndrome specifically and how it could impact Jack and your family. And then you get to this point of there's not enough resources out there. I want to step in and be that family that offers that to people, which is now worldwide. And we're getting get into how ridiculously impressive Jack's Basket has become in the last decade. But what really prompted you to say, we need this? And how did you identify what parents need and deserve at this time?
As the initial hours in the fog had kind of, lifted a little, and I was in deep grief of what I had planned for our lives, right? Like we think we're in control of the future, but ultimately, have realized not. So I had taken care of a young girl with Down syndrome when I was in college, and her mom was the first resource that really came to mind of saying like, I'm just looking for hope. And I will say in the hospital, I think the second day I had said, do you have any information on Down syndrome? And this nurse came back and she was like, oh, we've got this binder. And the binder said Down comforter. And it's had all the delays that Jack would have and that we needed to, dive into all this stuff. And I was kind of like, I'm not ready to hear all of this stuff of all the things that his needs and all of that. I just am longing for someone to tell us we're going to be okay. And so I called Alicia, Kirsta's mom. I said to Alicia, you're never going to believe I just gave birth to our baby boy and he has Down syndrome. And she said, Carissa, not for $1,000,000 would I ever change who she is. She has been the best gift. And I know that your son, Jack, will change your life for the better. And I clung to those words, really hearing from other parents just saying, it's going to be okay. You're not going to think about this diagnosis. You're going to fall in love with your baby and you're going to figure this out and things are going to be good. And the joy is going to far outweigh the things that you're going to experience on this journey. You're not alone. And that, what I will tell you, is just in any unexpected event that we experience through life, whenever you have somebody that's gone through something similar, it's a sounding board. It is like no shame in any of the thoughts that you're having. That's what I kept clinging to. And all of them would say, I wouldn't change my child. I just change how the diagnosis was given, because that ultimately impacted a lot of the next steps. And as I connected with more and more parents, my background's in education. So I naturally am looking for resources. And I told my husband, like, we need to get Jack's ears checked, eyes checked. We're going to learn everything about Down syndrome. And I always say, as he's approaching his 12th birthday, you know, I've learned a little bit about Down syndrome. I've learned a lot about Jack, because ultimately, just because you have the same diagnosis as someone else, it doesn't mean your life looks the same. There's a lot about our environment, all these things but they're available there's so many wonderful Down syndrome organizations and resources, and the loving and supportive community of parents and incredible individuals living with the diagnosis that would say life is good. Yet, a natural response is just fear. So how can we bridge that gap? Because I felt that most families, over half of our families that we serve, would say, I had a negative experience in how that diagnosis was delivered, and I didn't get connected. I felt so alone, yet I didn't know about everything that was available. That really broke my heart, along with families not being congratulated, that ultimately it's become about, the stories that I hear daily is what it really drives my passion to say these families deserve better, and these babies and these individuals they're worthy of celebration. And so let's start the story differently.
That's incredible, because the way that we inform people is so important. Things have changed a lot in the decade plus since you've had him, and now more people, at least in the United States, are finding out that their pregnancy has Down syndrome, or is very likely to have Down syndrome at that prenatal point. So we have this test called non-invasive prenatal screening that it has less false positives and false negatives than some of the screening that was more standard when you were pregnant with Jack. So I usually am the one that is bringing this up for the first time. And it's so important to be neutral with it, because of the different ways that people are going to take this information in. And like you've said, some phrases that I think are really useful of, this is surprising, this is maybe shocking, and things that are, we weren't expecting this. And that's usually how I try to approach these conversations, is I have some unexpected news to share with you, and this is what's coming up. And I center myself before those calls, because it's not every day I'm doing that. But sharing, where are you at with this? And you'll definitely have more questions as we go. We're here for you as support. Navigating, having the patient lead a lot of those conversations, because the questions that they ask is going to help inform me. What are they focused on? What are they leaning towards in terms of different decisions? And then resources. After I provide that initial result, which is a screening usually, the next thing, if they start asking questions, which most of the time they do, I say, if you're interested, I'm happy to connect you with a parent that has a kid with Down syndrome or an individual with Down syndrome, because there's only so much I can do. I'm not going to be as helpful as a parent or a person with Down syndrome, right? You're going to be so much more helpful than me in that scenario.
Right, right. Well, and I think what you had mentioned about just the unexpected, that's the phrase that we would love for the diagnosis to be given in a neutral way. That unexpected, I have some news that may be unexpected. Because I think of a variety of scenarios when I think of Lisa, who received that prenatal diagnosis, and she answered the phone, not expecting to get the healthcare prefix that you kind of like raises your heart rate a little bit. Like, why am I getting this call? Yet they were really excited to find out the gender of the baby. And when she received that call, On the other line, the genetic counselor said, I'm so sorry to tell you that you have a 93% chance your baby will have Down syndrome. Abortion and adoption are options. Half of these babies will have a heart defect. If you would like more information, you can reach out. And that pretty much summed up the conversation.
That is
As
a
a result of
harsh
that,
way to start. That
yep.
is
And
really
this is the thing. I have so many friends in healthcare in a variety of roles that support these families that receive this unexpected news. Ultimately, I don't believe the intent is to go in, but as you mentioned, it's a communication of patient led. So I always really think about every health system may do it a little differently in how, but ultimately asking the patient, because a lot of them are wondering, is it pink or blue? Are we going to be welcoming this new baby and we're having a boy or a girl? But also they're going to find out a lot of other information with these screening tests, and that may lead to additional tests and things like that. But when there's kind of an assumption that we need to provide all these options, and some of them were never considered, that it's saying, hey, if these results come back and I need to contact you, even thinking on that process side of how would you like this news over the phone? Some of our families are finding out on my chart. There's so many things, and this is a life-changing diagnosis. And so there's a whole lot of work that we have been working to. We know that communication is a modifiable skill. It's equipping all of you that are part of this news to deliver it in a way that is going to be heard and received. And we would love for that like needle to move from negative to more neutral to what research says 99% of parents that have a child with Down syndrome love their lives, love their child. Yet that's not always how this conversation starts. And I see a big disconnect then with the care or change of care. And that's where not only coming alongside the parents to get them linked to the resources, to get another parent to say, how are you doing with this new news? It's equipping healthcare providers to communicate news without bias.
yeah. And I think with that, it's also important coming from the healthcare provider perspective. Yes, we do need to provide information about the condition and that there is an increased chance for having a hole in the heart
Mhm.
and things that can sound very scary, but it's also understanding when is the right time and the right way to bring that information up. I don't bring any of that up in the initial phone call. It's enough of surprising news to say there's an increased chance, not risk. I always say
Yeah. Yes.
chance because
Thank
that's a
you.
neutral term, right?
Yep.
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 And a lot of this I've learned by talking with patient advocates like yourself and talking about that, and this is surprising, and we're going to have more conversations and also starting the call. If I'm very aware of what background noise do I hear, are they in the car, and asking, hey, do you have a moment to chat about some unexpected news, or really prefacing, because I don't want them on the highway and then they're getting into a car accident, or I'm on speakerphone and the kids in the back seat are hearing that. It's very important. Obviously all of this is on the phone for me, but I think that is, you can have those conversations at a later point. That initial does not need to be brought up. And I think the other thing for me, once we've brought up different options, including termination, if a patient says that's something that I would never consider and they say like that's off the table for me, I'm like, thank you for letting me know. I'm not going to bring this up again. And I say this to them. Let me know if anything changes, because I certainly am, here to have that conversation, but I want to respect and honor this pregnancy and help you celebrate in the ways that you want to. Because if a patient wants to have that, they will bring it up.
Yeah.
You do have to bring it up initially, I think, from my perspective, but that's something I hear from patients a lot through their pregnancy. Keep bringing, healthcare providers bring it up multiple times. Why are we doing that? That drives me insane when I hear that from people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a reality of a lot of our patients, and that does show trust in like, are they listening to me? But also, I think it's hard to not say that you're placing a value. Like when somebody's communicated that their feelings, like they're gonna want to trust you, and if you don't listen to them, that's gonna impact that relationship and their desire to continue their care there. I kind of alluded to the fear and just there's a lot long term that oftentimes families can be like, well, will my child be able to do this, 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 and that? And that I love hearing from you that it's a very more of a brief, kind of shorter initial conversation. I have two other children with one less chromosome than Jack.
Sure.
And I
Love
also
that phrasing.
I think of it often. No one walked into my room and said all these statistics to which they would be experiencing a variety of things throughout their life. Yet we know about Down syndrome, these are potential outcomes because of this extra 21st chromosome. Yet, just if you've had enough experiences throughout life with someone that has the typical number of chromosomes, there's a variety of unexpected events that we can't really predict the future. So I always say give the short term information because it is information overload. We as parents already have flooded our minds with possible scenarios. And the thing that, going back to the question that you asked about like making sure that these families, when they receive this new news prenatally or at birth, ultimately it's their baby first and they're going to need to be fed and this and that, and there's a variety of different experiences, if it's additional surgeries or different things that will come along. What we want them to know is they're not alone. There is somebody that's been through that experience that can just help and support and give hope that you will get through it. You will be much more resilient. Your child will teach you not to take little things for granted. I think of, Jack he has had some significant health experiences from, surgeries to aspiration to growth hormone, possibly because in healthcare, you would look at all of those things as problems and issues. They're just a part of our life. And it's helped us, build a community around us so that we can give Jack the best care that he deserves to help him live to the best potential, as we would do with any of our kids. There's a long list of things that I could say. Without Jack in our lives, we wouldn't have met an occupational therapist or physical therapist or speech therapist on things that my other two kids haven't gone down that road of needing that support. But ultimately, we see them as an extended family. We see them as people that have devoted their lives to ensuring that Jack can live a fulfilling and wonderful life. And he's really changed all of us for the better.
That's amazing to hear. And part of that connection is something that you all provide at Jack's Basket, because from what I'm learning within the US, you've delivered to all 50 states. I mean, what, like 53 countries, over 10,000 baskets worldwide. I mean, these numbers are incredible. You think about each basket, how that's impacting that family times 10,000. I mean, it's wild. It's amazing. Part of that in the US is when that basket is delivered, it's delivered by a person that is part of the community in some way, which is just incredible that you're able to offer this. What went into deciding what actually goes in the basket and what is in the basket for people wanting to know? And then we're going to talk about how people can actually say, hey, this family has someone with Down syndrome. We'd like to send a basket to this new little baby.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, with my background in education, knowing there's a variety of resources. Some families are going to want an in-person group to meet with people. Some people want the online resources. Some just want the phone call or the connection and they're going to kind of navigate. But ultimately, what's in the basket, and I found too, there's such a variety of resources, but healthcare providers like, where do I send them? So let's put it all in one central location. And let's put it with gifts because you're welcoming a new baby. So anything from blankets to bibs and burp cloths, typical newborn gifts, because we want them, again, they're welcoming their new baby. You'll figure out Down syndrome. But then there also are some age appropriate books to explain Down syndrome to siblings, cousins, kids. And then there's also like from diagnosis to delivery and welcoming a newborn with Down syndrome. So, like a balance of, for those that are really craving, like, how do I share this news with my family, to, simple questions and thoughts that come up along the journey. There's a memoir in there that's a relatable parent that kind of, has just real life scenarios, but also humor in it too. There's a gift for mom, a bracelet that says, "You make me better." That's a phrase that we have at Jack's Basket. Onesies and booties and
Big
uh,
basket, my goodness.
well, and we connect with those local Down syndrome organizations, understanding that we're doing a lot of work in the communication, diagnosis advocacy work with equipping providers. They're the ones typically requesting the basket for the new family. We get that request from wherever in the world. And if we have those local resources, we'll put that in that basket. Then we have a parent in that area that will end up being the link to that new parent. So we really see ourselves as an extension of care. And then that basket is delivered in person to the family. Now, our tagline is, we celebrate babies with Down syndrome. We understand not every parent is ready right from the confirmation of the diagnosis, if they got that, screening diagnostic test or at birth. We will also ship the basket to the home of the family if they feel more comfortable doing that versus meeting with a stranger. Just with a message of, we are coming alongside you wherever you are in accepting this new path. There is resources when you're available, but we're really from the timing of diagnosis to 1 year. And we want them have launched into the community, but that's kind of the time that we really serve them.
And that makes sense that it's mostly healthcare providers ordering the baskets, because they're the ones that are a little bit more involved in kind of knowing, like, oh, this is the path that we're going down in terms of the information we're giving and resources. So what information is needed for a healthcare provider? Or let's say there's someone listening that they're like, my sister or cousin or something just got this diagnosis during pregnancy or had a baby born, and they researched it and they stumbled on our interview here. What information is needed? I'm thinking their name, address, anything else needed to actually order the basket. And
Yes.
it's free. I also want to mention that too, because you guys fund everything.
Yes, correct. Good questions. So let's say you just recently gave this diagnosis to a new patient, again, following up with them and saying, "I'd like to tell you about a resource. It's called Jack's Basket. You are offered a parent connection if you would like, but it is a free gift basket to you with all the resources and some gifts and to help you along the journey." And those can be requested right on our website, jacksbasket.org. And when you get verbal consent from them, then some people do this right in the room if you're in person for this appointment, but we would ask that you provide enough information. If if there is a heart defect, we would connect them with another parent that has had similar heart defect, or, we know that the baby might potentially have a surgery. Any of the information you provide on our website, obviously we respect HIPAA. Everyone needs to keep all the information confidential, but you are getting the consent from the family, and that oftentimes can come verbal consent. And then we just really take it from there. Our volunteer will reach out to them and coordinate a time to get them the basket. Let's say you're a family or friend and you're requesting it. "Hey, I had a college roommate that just gave birth or just got the news." You can fill out the form for the family and friend. But we do ask that you talk to the parents beforehand, just so that they're not surprised that it's coming. Maybe they haven't shared the news. So you'll find all that info on our website. But yes, had the distinct honor of welcoming over 10,000 babies in 53 countries and all 50 states. Right now, we are on pace to celebrate about 6 to 7 babies a day. Last year,
That many a day. I mean, I guess I could have done the math in my head, but
yeah,
wow.
yeah. We really have grown and expanded in the last few years, just ensuring we have a desire that every baby diagnosed with Down syndrome would be welcomed and celebrated. And that could be anywhere in the world. We will fulfill that basket request and get that family linked to the resources.
Love how you personalize it as well. Like if they have a heart difference, if there's certain things that are more common for babies
Mhm.
with Down syndrome compared to babies without Down syndrome. And even in the area, like I'm sure if I sent in for a patient, I'm on the Connecticut New York line, you'd probably be like Gigi's Playhouse. And,
Yep,
and obviously
yep,
there's different locations of that, but
yep.
that's a big thing
Yes.
in our area here.
Yeah, we partner with all those national orgs, all of that. I mean, that's the part where I felt early on I was trying to find my own resources. And I was like, wait, I met my friend Jenny at Gigi's and I went to the Step Up Walk and I thought, who doesn't have a child with Down syndrome? Like all of these things that in a sense, I was like, why don't families know about this? And
Yeah.
so decided to say, "Hey, let's put it all in one place and let the family decide what they'd like to dive into."
That's incredible. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, too, because we have so many genetic counselors like myself listening, you guys also have a continuing education unit, at least one that I
Yeah.
stumbled across.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that. And I assume that's also for just other healthcare providers as well, not just genetic counselors, but
Yes. Yes. Last year was a big year for us related to the diagnosis advocacy work with healthcare providers. So we launched a medical curriculum called Communicating Unexpected News. It was based on a publication that we did on really breaking the bad news paradigm, communicating unexpected news, like when bad news isn't necessarily bad, objectively bad and subjectively. We're 10 CMEs for that curriculum. We also were like, hey, we're about to attend the Genetic Counselor Conference. Let's do a webinar and let's provide an opportunity. We'll cover your CEUs. And if you're, we saw over 600 live participants on that webinar, and then have provided it for you all can take at any time with a post assessment, but ultimately just giving you some scenarios, equipping you. It's not a matter of if you'll be giving unexpected news, it's a matter of when. And really providing some diagnosis experiences from our community. And we would love for you to check that out on our website under the provider resources. Again, I have so many friends in healthcare, and they oftentimes said, this wasn't in our training, or we have discovered this. And I felt that our medical team of providers, so we have volunteers on our medical team, that we really kind of put our heads together and said, how can we reach a bigger group of healthcare providers? And that's what we did last year.
that's amazing because I think that's so needed. And you can take those skills in so many different directions, not just for providing information for Down syndrome specifically, but we're all in genetic counseling, unfortunately, delivering surprising news all the time. So through
Mhm.
genetic testing, usually. So that is just a wonderful resource. And Carissa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this. I mean, you guys are just amazing of what you've been able to provide for, again, over 10,000 families with a baby that, now some of them are 10 years old at this point, with Down syndrome. And it's just such a wonderful resource for people to be aware of. And I just want to thank you on behalf of the Down syndrome community for the massive impact that you have had personally of your family and growing this amazing nonprofit. I'm blown away.
Hey, thank you. I mean, when I think of World Down Syndrome Day before Jack was born, I wasn't aware. I mean, I probably heard about it, but ultimately, he has truly impacted our lives in a way that I wish more people got to experience. He has really helped us to see every life was, we each were equipped with gifts and talents and abilities. And he's really helped us emphasize, a society that says it's a matter of what you do. He's helped us to celebrate who we are. Each of us were created to do amazing things, and that isn't dependent on the number of chromosomes. And he may need more support than another person, but that's okay. We're grateful for this opportunity to spread the extra love that comes with this extra chromosome and a variety of other extras. But we're grateful for all of you that get to be a part of supporting these new families and coming alongside them. And please reach out to us at Jack's Basket. We would love to just get connected and celebrate with you all.
We'll have links in the show notes for everything we talked about, the CEU, course, the publication that you mentioned, being able to order a basket, everything is going to be in the show notes if you're listening to this in a podcast app, or just go to dnatoday.com and click on this episode. Carissa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching DNA Today. To access all of our episodes, head over to dnatoday.com. We also have a lot of bonus content on there that you can enjoy. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, guest pitches, you name it, send them in to info@dnatoday.com. We'd also really appreciate if you could take a moment to rate and review the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to the show. It really helps more nerds like yourself find the show. Also, if you like giveaways and other ways to connect with us, I recommend following us on social. We're at DNA Today Podcast. We also have a Patreon if you want to be the most level involved in the show. That's also at DNA Today Podcast. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Join us next time to learn and discover new advances in the world of genetics.